Welcome to the deep dive. Our mission today is to cut through the glittering surface of the modern digital landscape. We're not here to just discuss, follower counts or the latest algorithm changes.
No.
We're diving into the fundamental mechanisms that create economic value and, maybe more importantly, the intense and often hidden human cost that's exacted from the people who are required to generate that value.
That's exactly right. And our sources define this whole complex apparatus as the influence economy.
The influence economy.
Yeah, it's a systemic departure from, let's say, traditional value generation. In this economy, profit is extracted not just from tangible goods or, easily quantifiable services, but specifically from an individual's ability to generate, manage, and sustainably hold influence and notoriety among a very specific, engaged audience.
Okay, let's unpack that definition. I think we have to start with the nature of influence itself. If we look back to foundational sociology, you always end up at Max Weber's thesis on charismatic authority.
Right, the classic definition.
And traditionally, that charisma was seen as sourced from, the inherent innate qualities of some exceptional individual. Think of a historic leader whose personal magnetism alone just drew fervent allegiance. Charisma was an endowment. It was something you had.
But the sources we looked at argue that what we are witnessing today, particularly on these highly personalized platforms like YouTube or Twitch or TikTok, it fundamentally alters that whole structure.
How so?
Well, these are not innate, pre-existing cults of personality. The new culting of social actors is described as a participatory, collaborative, and communal process. The charisma is actually co-constructed by the figure and the follower.
That's a crucial distinction.
It is.
Because it fundamentally changes the relationship dynamic, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It means the audience isn't just passively receiving or consuming some star's innate perfect charisma.
No, not at all.
They are actively, reflexively helping to build the marketable celebrity persona themselves.
And this allegiance, it's not stable. It's constantly being articulated and re-articulated through audience feedback. You see it every single day in the comments section.
Yeah.
A follower might confirm they stay watching a creator precisely because of their authenticity or their down-to-earth personality. Then others chime in, they confirm that sentiment, and in doing so, they're legitimizing and reinforcing the personal qualities the creator is displaying.
So the audience is confirming the authenticity.
Yeah.
And in that very act, they are actively co-constructing and legitimizing the persona that the creator is trying to monetize.
Exactly. This active confirmation is what imbues the creator with value. The creator is performing their self-reflexive construction, shaping a persona they believe will gather influence.
Right.
But that persona only gains economic weight based on the audience's willingness to confirm and manage that influence. If the audience stops confirming that persona's authenticity, the economic value just collapses.
But what's the hidden danger in that co-construction?
Yeah.
Because, superficially, it sounds like an empowering relationship, almost like a democracy of attention.
The danger, and it's a big one, lies in the requirement for perpetual performance. The influence economy requires individuals to engage in this non-stop self-reflexive construction and really a high-stakes performance of a marketable persona.
It's a job where you are constantly being rated and reviewed by the very people you are serving.
Exactly. And that dynamic sets the stage for our central dilemma here. The continuous public performance of the self is mandatory for economic survival, and that comes with a catastrophic human cost.
Which moves us directly into our first major thread. The psychological cost of turning vulnerability into content, and why this goes so far beyond simple professional exhaustion. Let's start with the severity of the mental health profile among these creators.
We have to. The academic literature has moved way beyond just talking about influencer burnout. The studies we have show this is systemic psychological pressure driven by the actual structure of the platforms themselves. It's a kind of systemic trauma.
We're describing a very specific pressure cooker environment. What does that trauma look like in practice? What are creators actually reporting?
They report a clear, identifiable demand cycle. This cycle forces them to continuously create content and manage a highly customized, often emotionally demanding online persona. And this leads to quantifiable feelings of exhaustion, self-doubt, anxiety, and just this profound emotional disconnection. And all of that is compounded by intense frustration over, unpredictable platform performance.
That unpredictability is key, isn't it? A creator might put in 30, 40 hours producing their best ever piece of work, only to have an algorithmic shift suddenly just wipe out their reach or demonetize the content.
Yes. Their effort stops correlating with success.
And That failure to correlate effort with reward,
Yeah.
that's what creates the addiction loop, right? The platform dependency that is so psychologically damaging.
It is. The entire job demands staying constantly relevant in a completely opaque and unpredictable environment.
So tell us about the mechanism of this addiction loop. Is this just behavioral reinforcement, or is there a sort of deeper neurological trap at play here?
Oh, it's deeper. The platform algorithms are incredibly sophisticated reinforcement mechanisms. They reinforce addiction and self-doubt simultaneously, trapping creators in this relentless cycle.
Wow.
Performance metrics, likes, views, engagement, they act as the necessary external validation. And this validation isn't just a bonus. It becomes essential to their professional identity and their sense of self-worth. It's a chemical hit of dopamine that temporarily relieves the anxiety caused by the platform's inherent uncertainty.
Sounds like a psychological dependency, where success is only defined by an external, uncontrollable source.
Yeah.
You become reliant on the platform for your sense of professional competence and, I guess, your personal validation.
That's the crux of it. When your sense of competence is tied to an opaque algorithm, you're constantly chasing a moving target. And this loop forces a really profound conflict when the online persona, what we can call the 60% shared self, diverges drastically from the real, private, 100% self.
The pressure to maintain that divergence must be immense. You're constantly modifying that 60% persona to meet algorithmic and audience demands rather than just expressing who you are. The performance becomes the primary motivation, replacing authentic expression.
And that divergence is the systemic pressure point. You know, one creator might argue that while they only share 60% of their life, it still feels completely me. But for so many others, they articulate a clear and widening chasm between their internal sincerity and the perceived pressure to be, say, on brand or perpetually upbeat, especially if they're sponsored.
Yeah.
This blurring of lines between the authentic and the marketable is where the systemic trauma truly begins.
To really understand the mechanism of this psychological dismantling, we need to bring in some established theory. The sources we have rely heavily on self-determination theory, or SDT.
SDT provides the perfect lens for this. It's a macro theory of human motivation, and it suggests that for individuals to maintain intrinsic motivation and mental well-being, they need the fulfillment of three basic psychological needs: autonomy, competence, and relatedness.
And in the influence economy.
In the influence economy, these three needs are systematically, structurally undermined.
And we need to sit with that idea of systematically undermined. Let's break down autonomy and competence specifically. How does the platform architecture actually destroy them?
Okay, so autonomy is about having control over your actions, feeling ownership of your choices. Competence is about experiencing mastery, feeling that your effort leads reliably to desired outcomes.
Got it.
Influencers consistently express a severe lack of control over their content, not because of their own creative decisions, but due to external pressure.
And what are those external pressures? We're talking about algorithms, yes, but also the demands of the commerce stream, right? The brands.
Exactly. The need for competence is just destroyed because, as we noted, an algorithmic shift can completely erase your reach. Your effort doesn't reliably translate to success. Therefore, you never achieve a sense of mastery. You are always guessing what the unseen system wants from you.
So you're constantly making content under conditions of extreme uncertainty. That lack of predictable cause and effect means you never feel like a competent professional, even if you are earning millions of dollars.
Precisely. And the autonomy issue is compounded significantly by brand integration and the requirements of monetization. The second you start earning money, your creative choices are often dictated by what is brand safe, what a platform's policy permits, or what an affiliate partner requires in terms of delivery or tone.
The creator is performing their self-expression under intense commercial duress.
The self is no longer autonomous. It is a leveraged asset.
And the SDT framework shows that the outcome of undermining those two basic needs, autonomy and competence, is just devastating.
It leads directly to negative mental health outcomes. I mean, the literature is very specific, listing burnout, exhaustion, and depression as direct results of operating under conditions that strip away self-determination. You are essentially working in a job that is designed to make you feel powerless and inadequate.
And to compound this sense of inadequacy, we layer in the social comparison theory, or SCT. This theory says that individuals evaluate their own status, abilities, and opinions through comparison with their peers, and social media just makes this comparison ubiquitous.
And this creates a double-edged sword that the platforms exploit for engagement. These comparisons cut two ways, upward and downward.
Let's focus on the detrimental side first, upward comparison. This is what the algorithm often pushes you towards, isn't it? The aspirational, successful peers.
Right. And seeing others succeed, especially those who appear to effortlessly meet the demands of the algorithm, tends to trigger immediate feelings of inadequacy, depression, and envy. This effect is particularly devastating for individuals who already lack a stable, self-determined motivational base, those relying heavily on external validation. They spiral downward because the comparison instantly threatens the fragile sense of self-worth they had derived from their metrics.
They see someone else achieving what they desperately need, the validation. And instead of feeling motivated, they just feel diminished.
Critically, though, SCT also identifies a positive aspect: downward comparison.
Okay.
Comparing oneself to those who are visibly struggling, performing worse, or clearly less successful can actually enhance self-esteem and increase life satisfaction. It reinforces positive emotional well-being and relativeness.
But the architecture of modern platforms is designed to push aspiration, not contentment. The feed is optimized to make you look upward, towards the top 1%, not downward, towards the 90% who are also struggling just like you.
Right. The constant performance trap is therefore reinforced by comparative metrics that maximize anxiety.
We've been discussing this conceptually, but the cost is measured in lives.
Yeah.
We have to use the devastating case study of Emma Atienza to illustrate the horrific real-world consequences of this systemic pressure.
Yes, we do. Emma Atienza was a 19-year-old social media personality who used her platform precisely for mental health advocacy. She was trying to leverage that co-constructed persona for positive social change.
And she was navigating profound internal challenges herself.
She was. She had been diagnosed with bipolar disorder and complex PTSD. The sources detail how she had undergone intensive therapy to process past trauma, including the horrific experience of being roofied and assaulted.
My God.
She was sharing these deepest vulnerabilities to help others, creating content that required immense emotional labor.
Yet, instead of receiving support from the collective audience she was trying to serve, she was met with a constant toxic feedback loop from the public.
And that is the tragedy of public life in the influence economy. She faced relentless public scrutiny, severe cyberbullying, and even death threats. The sources specifically note that she received threats for pushing back against conservative systems, which shows how her public vulnerability and advocacy became intensely politicized and weaponized against her.
The moment she attempted to use her platform to challenge power structures, her identity became a target.
Yeah.
That demonstrates a deep-seated risk. If your value is tied to your persona and that persona challenges the status quo, the system can just turn on itself.
She spoke openly about the intense pressure required to maintain authenticity online, that delicate balance between sharing enough truth to be genuine, but not so much that you are destroyed by the inevitable toxic response.
Right.
The mental exhaustion wasn't just from generating video content, it was from the nonstop effort required to maintain an upbeat, palatable persona while dealing with profound internal and external struggles and just intense harassment.
It's a stark illustration of the complete lack of a safety net. She ultimately deactivated her account before her death by suicide in October 2025 in Santa Monica. It's a sharp reminder that the exhaustion creators feel isn't just professional burnout, it's a systemic psychological dismantling, where the cost is measured in human tragedy.
And when the system is built on exploiting these parasocial bonds and quantifying influence becomes the only metric of success, the feedback loop can become lethal. There is no HR structure, no union, no institutional protection. If the creator crashes, the fallout is entirely on them.
And yet this entire process, this required professionalization of the self, is often framed in business discourse not as an exploitation, but as a solution. It's packaged as self-determination and empowerment.
It is. And this brings us to analyzing personal branding as a neoliberal ideology. The literature shows that personal branding discourse is explicitly framed as a solution to contemporary socioeconomic conditions, a response to job insecurity, stagnant wages, and the lack of traditional career paths.
So if the government isn't going to provide a social safety net, and corporations are automating jobs, the ideology says, you must become your own safety net. You have to become your own corporation.
Precisely. It encourages an ideology of extreme individualism. Success or failure is placed squarely and solely on the individual's responsibility. You are the captain of your soul, responsible for your own economic well-being with no reliance on collective or social programs. It actively marries the personal sphere to the corporate sphere.
Positioning the self, then, as one would position a product or a company, the goal is to turn one's given identity into a tool, a brand, to place oneself better in the capitalist labor marketplace.
Mm-hmm.
We even see historical precedent, celebrities changing their names to be more marketable, but the digital age forces this branding onto everyone, not just movie stars.
And social networking sites, SNSs, they accelerate this phenomenon by their very design, particularly those platforms we can term boundary blurring SNSs. They are built to encourage a single composite self-presentation to a merged audience.
This is where impression management theory breaks down. Traditionally, you managed impressions by keeping your audiences separate, right? Your professional colleagues saw one version of you, your family saw another, and your college friends saw a third.
Boundary blurring just destroys that separation. And now your potential employer or HR department is viewing the exact same profile as your college pals.
Which makes the presentation of self inherently risky.
Exactly. When unintended audiences like HR professionals checking LinkedIn or Facebook access information intended for friends, and they perceive that information negatively, it directly harms your professional prospects. The cost of a misstep is enormous.
The ultimate irony here, circling back to our charisma discussion, is that the loyalty initially garnered by a successful creator loyalty, rooted in perceived personal authentic qualities, begins to dissipate the moment they succeed enough to make it a formalized career.
That's the classic sociological concept of the routinization of charisma, as defined by Weber. Charismatic authority, by its nature, exists outside the realm of everyday routine in the profane sphere. The moment the creator's neoteric hobby shifts to a professional career, it has to become bureaucratic and commoditized by the contaminating influence of the market.
So the community sees the process of professionalization itself as a betrayal. They feel that the creator has sold out.
Absolutely. Followers attribute the loss of that initial authentic appeal to institutionalization and market contamination. We see the source material detailing the reaction to creators like Estee Lalonde. When she transitioned to more sponsored, commercially structured content, comments just emerged condemning her for losing her down-to-earth vibes as a result of paid-for ads.
That sentiment confirms that the followers perceive they had helped co-construct the celebrity.
Yes.
And when that construct is altered by external commercial interests, the charismatic community feels that connection, that sense of shared, intimate community eroding. The authenticity they helped build is being sold off.
And that deep sense of betrayal directly sets the stage for our second movement. If the psychological cost is the price of admission, Movement 2 reveals where all that extracted emotional labor and quantified influence actually goes. Directly into a highly concentrated, often fraudulent profit model.
We have to now dissect the economics of intimacy, which relies on exploiting these parasocial relationships, where followers perceive influencers as social partners, building deep emotional bonds that mirror real-life friendships, but are fundamentally one-sided.
And the financial figures for platforms built on this precise model of emotional extraction they're staggering, yet deceptive. We must use the data from OnlyFans to illustrate the sheer scale of wealth extraction.
Okay, give us the sensational top-line number first.
In 2024, OnlyFans creators collectively earned $6.6 billion.
Oh.
To put that figure in perspective, it actually exceeds the combined salaries of every single NBA player, which totaled about $4.9 billion that same year.
That is genuinely shocking. It suggests this is a major economic force driven by the monetization of personalized attention. But as you said, the reality is far more brutal when you look beneath the surface.
Here's the necessary contextualization. There are over 4 million registered creators on that platform. When you divide the collective $6.6 billion by the number of creators, the statistical average creator earned only about $1,600 a year.
$1,600.
A year.
So that means the vast, sensational wealth is concentrated at the absolute pinnacle, the top 1% or maybe even the top 0.1% of the accounts, while the overwhelming majority of creators are generating virtually nothing.
It proves the concentration of wealth relies entirely on exploiting the deep parasocial bonds with superfans, followers willing to spend massive amounts, sometimes millions, on a single top creator they perceive as an intimate partner.
Right.
The promise of self-determination is used to recruit 4 million workers who make minimum wage, while the platform and the elite creators concentrate all the revenue.
And the profit concentration is maximized by the structure of the business itself. The platform operates with minimal overhead. It's an asset-light model that relies almost entirely on capitalizing on the emotional currency generated by the creators themselves.
It is a perfect example of extraction. The platform takes a substantial cut of revenue generated by the effective labor of millions of individuals, but it carries none of the traditional liabilities or costs associated with managing a massive workforce or large physical assets. The architecture is just designed to funnel wealth upwards through a minimal structure.
What makes this entire economic architecture a house of cards, though, is the fact that its core quantifiable metric influence, engagement, audience quality is fundamentally undermined by pervasive fraud. It's an economy built on fake numbers.
And the financial impact of this fabrication is not trivial. Advertisers reportedly lost $1.3 billion to fake influencer marketing in 2019 alone.
A billion.
$1.3 billion. And that suggests the problem is endemic and widespread across the entire ecosystem.
So how does this black market for fake influence actually operate? Are we talking about small, amateur operations or sophisticated, organized criminal enterprises? What are the mechanics of fabricating perceived value?
It's a sophisticated global market. The black market offers services across multiple categories, the open web, the dark web, and offline word-of-mouth networks that are readily accessible through basic search engine queries.
Okay.
The fabrication involves purchasing everything from fake views, fake comments, bot-generated likes, and entire pre-aged social media accounts.
And the prices are shockingly low for basic manipulation, which must suggest a vast supply.
They are. For basic engagement, approximately 10 euros, so just over 10 US dollars, can buy you up to 90,000 fake views or 200 fake comments for a single social media post.
So the threshold for faking success is extremely low. Even minor operators can artificially inflate their perceived value.
But the price of a fake account itself, that varies wildly based on how difficult it is to detect.
Of course.
The price of a fake account reflects its reliability and perceived authenticity. The source material details a clear stratification based on two factors: method of registration and age. Automatically registered accounts are the cheapest and least reliable, often created by simple scripts and easily flagged by platform detection systems.
What's the next tier up? The accounts that offer slightly more credibility.
Those would be the manually registered or farmed accounts. These are more labor-intensive to create and maintain. They involve human or sophisticated bot interaction to make them appear more real. So, consequently, they are more expensive and more reliable for long-term use in fake influence campaigns.
And what about the accounts that command the highest price tag? The ones that are virtually indistinguishable from genuine profiles?
Those are the oldest accounts, specifically those that are 7 or more years old. They are the most expensive because their history offers higher credibility, making them significantly less likely to be detected as malicious or fabricated. Fraudulent influence relies heavily on the appearance of longevity and trust.
And beyond just the age, the accounts are also categorized by their content level, right? It's not just a dormant profile you are buying.
Correct. The sources detail a spectrum of content categories. No content, profile picture only, profile picture and a few photos, or the most expensive tier, which includes a full history of pictures, photos, and posts. Advanced services even offer custom-made, highly developed accounts that are nearly impossible to differentiate from genuine ones.
It's an entire, highly professionalized industry dedicated to fabricating the quantifiable influence that the core business model demands.
It is, and all of this complex fraud relies on one foundational element. Before you can buy and sell influence, you have to find a way to quantify it. Which brings us to the formal measurement and commodification of the self.
Marketers have historically relied on quantifiable measurements, even if those measurements are a bit malleable. The Q-score is a classic example from the analog age.
Right. The Q-score is a metric that focuses on familiarity and likability. While it doesn't directly measure influence, it can't predict if you'll buy a product, it serves as an industry stand-in for celebrity and notoriety. Marketing evaluations use familiarity and likability as a proxy or predictor of possible influence, providing a consistent, standardized basis to investigate the influence economy.
And this historical precedent shows that we've always been interested in quantifying the power of personality. The sources even note the historical case of IBM's supercomputer Deep Blue, which achieved celebrity status and received a Q rating.
That example is so critical because it bridges the gap between human and technological performance. It demonstrates that celebrity status and branding are inherently intertwined with technology. If an AI can achieve celebrity status and be quantified, then the mechanism for commodification is purely abstract. It's about perceived notoriety, regardless of the physical reality of the performer.
But the quantification became far more acute, granular, and invasive with the rise of social media measurement services like Clout.
Clout is the perfect modern example. It generated a genuine currency by quantifying influence based on engagement and perceived audience quality. It wasn't just measuring, it was assigning a score that could be traded for perks and favors.
So the existence of clout confirmed a market. It confirmed that this abstract quality influence could be quantified, made material, and then commodified.
Precisely. This quantification of influence, the ability to generate social and then financial capital through notoriety, is the necessary step that precedes its commodification and subsequent fabrication. Cloud's rise and fall confirm the emergence of a market where engagement is not just a metric, but the currency being bought, sold, and, as we've established, extensively faked.
And once influence is quantified and commodified, and the fraud is rampant, we are left with a system that has fundamentally broken the ethical contract. We move now into our final domain, the ethical vacuum created by algorithmic control and the erosion of accountability.
The ethical core of the problem here is really the question of control. When persuasive content is created not just by a human actor, but by algorithms or AI models designed for maximization, whether of profit or political outcomes, the foundational question of who the communicator is and who is responsible for the message becomes blurred and often unanswerable.
And that technological complexity allows the persuasion to become insidious because it can subvert intellectual autonomy, the capacity of individuals to think critically and form beliefs based on their own reasoning and evidence.
The sources introduce the concept of rational manipulative persuasion, or RMP, to explain this mechanism.
RMP.
Yes, this is persuasion achieved by AI models that relies on facts and evidence. It uses the truth, but it uses those facts selectively to create a biased, prepackaged narrative.
So if the AI is using only true facts, is the core ethical failure the lack of context or the intentional omission of counterarguments?
It's the latter, the intentional omission of counterarguments, which deprives the audience of the necessary elements required to evaluate and counter the speaker's arguments effectively.
Crucially, RMP maintains the appearance of reason, maintaining the veneer of being factual, but it is fundamentally manipulative because it denies the listener the full scope of information needed for truly autonomous thought.
That distinction is so critical because it separates RMP from irrational persuasion, which relies on outright fallacies or falsehoods. RMP is far more dangerous because it hides manipulation behind a facade of truth and reason.
And this sophistication leads directly to the black box problem. The complexity of these AI models, especially those employing complex argumentative approaches, reduces their explainability. We can see the inputs and we can see the outputs, the successful persuasion, but the algorithmic decision processes that translate one to the other are often opaque, a literal black box.
And if you can't explain how the AI arrived at a persuasive outcome, it becomes incredibly difficult for any stakeholders, regulators, researchers, even the companies themselves, to ensure accountability, fairness, and transparency regarding how those persuasive outputs are influencing societal interactions. Right. For example, a data scientist might observe a biased outcome that is successfully manipulating a political group. They might have the power to stop it, but the algorithmic decision processes generating the bias are so complex and nonlinear that the specific intervention required is often haphazard or impossible to pinpoint. The system is designed for results, not for understanding.
We mentioned Deep Blue receiving a Q rating earlier, showing how technology and celebrity intersect. This logic has been fully internalized by corporations who now use personalization and celebrity logic to manage their own brands in this fractured digital space.
We're talking about corporate personification. Brands utilize personification, which can be a real individual or a fictional persona, to expand their brand identities and appeal to consumers in a more personal, less direct, and ultimately more influential manner than traditional monolithic marketing.
Why is that personalized touch so necessary now?
Because social media is inherently personal, consumers expect a direct, two-way relationship with a brand, which mimics the parasocial relationship they have with creators. So companies have had to adopt what we call celebrity logic. They must act like fallible, apologetic, relatable people.
Can you give us an example of a brand successfully executing this celebrity logic when faced with a crisis?
A classic case is DiGiorno Pizza. They misused a trending, sensitive hashtag on Twitter and faced an immediate consumer firestorm.
I remember that.
Instead of issuing a single generic press release, the old corporate method, they began responding to hundreds of angry tweets directly, one by one. Each response contained a personalized message of apology and regret, often signed off as a specific individual.
That strategy, the personalized mea culpa, reinforces the brand's human connection. It makes a corporation seem more like a fallible individual who made a mistake, rather than an unfeeling, impenetrable, monolithic entity.
It successfully navigates the risk associated with direct social media communication. By performing the emotional labor of apology and vulnerability, they repair the parasocial bond and regain trust, using the very tools of personal branding that creators are simultaneously being psychologically destroyed by.
Now let's look at how audiences and communities cope, or I guess defend themselves against this world of high-pressure performance, algorithmic manipulation, and fabricated sincerity. Often, the defense mechanism itself is just another form of weaponization or exclusion.
The internet enables mass self-communication, where individuals have the tools of mass communication focused on themselves. But this also allows for lateral peer-to-peer surveillance, which can quickly turn toxic, reinforcing ideology through threats and fear, often turning into structural violence.
And the ultimate weaponization of this is doxing.
Right. Doxing is the intentional public release of private or personal information about an individual by a third party, often with the explicit intent to humiliate, threaten, or punish that person for an ideological transgression or perceived wrong.
This is a profound inversion of the influence economy. The influence economy encourages the controlled, managed display of personal information for economic gain. Doxing takes that control away completely, turning the victim's identity and private data into a weapon used to enforce an ideology. It strips them of their autonomy and privacy.
It's the consequence of living in a world where your identity is your currency and your personal data is public domain. When you step out of line, the community that helped build your persona can immediately tear it down by exposing the 100% self you tried so hard to protect.
And this behavior thrives in communities that function as insular, highly polarized echo chambers, like the communities surrounding toxic Bitcoin maximalism.
For those unfamiliar, toxic Bitcoin maximalism is the BTC-only philosophy, which is often hostile to anything deemed a shitcoin, alternative cryptocurrencies, or to the practice of holding Bitcoin on centralized exchanges. While framed by some insiders as a necessary defense against scammers and weak technology, this community functions psychologically as a profound echo chamber.
We need to spend time here, because there's a crucial distinction that dramatically changes the psychological implications of this communal behavior, the difference between an epistemic bubble and an echo chamber.
Yes, that distinction is everything. An epistemic bubble is a relatively benign information network where important, relevant sources are excluded merely by omission, perhaps unintentionally or due to algorithmic filtering. Information is just missing.
And because it's merely information that is missing, that bubble can be easily popped. If you expose the member to the missing information, they can theoretically adjust their understanding, assuming they trust the source.
The echo chamber, however, is far stronger and more pernicious. It is an epistemic construct where voices and information are not just missed, they are actively excluded and discredited through the manipulation of trust within the community.
That manipulation of trust is key. What does that look like in practice within a maximalist echo chamber?
Well, if a respected outsider or an academic provides data that contradicts the BTC-only narrative, that voice is not simply ignored. The community immediately questions the speaker's motivations, competence, or loyalty. They might accuse them of being paid by a rival coin or being too ignorant to understand the technology.
So insiders in an echo chamber become insulated from the validity of counter-evidence because the chamber has successfully discredited all external sources of information.
Exactly. Outside voices are heard, but they are preemptively dismissed because the source of the message has been declared untrustworthy by the inner circle. This closed loop leads directly and rapidly to group polarization, reinforcing existing, often extreme beliefs through mutual affirmation and shared, weaponized distrust of the outside world.
So whether it's a creator struggling to maintain a brand that the algorithm accepts, an advertiser fabricating engagement to survive, or a highly ideological group solidifying their identity by actively discrediting and excluding others, every part of this economy is centered on the production, maintenance, and monetization of perceived influence.
Which brings us back to the large-scale view. We've synthesized a massive amount of source material here. So what does this all mean for you, the person navigating this complex landscape?
The sources paint a very clear, if deeply unsettling, picture of a systemic trap. The digital economy is characterized by intense psychological exploitation from influencer burnout that rises to the level of systemic trauma and, tragically, suicide, all built on a massive foundation of financial fraud, where the metrics are faked. And all of this is structured and perpetuated by opaque algorithmic forces that actively lack accountability.
This is the definition of communicative capitalism in action. The core trap is that the desire to speak to, perform the self, to engage, to maintain relevance, to be the captain of your soul, outweighs the desire to speak for a specific, meaningful purpose.
And that desire to speak creates the effective labor loop we discussed earlier. A constant cycling from the anxiety of uncertainty to the short-term relief of a like or a view, and immediately back to the anxiety of needing the next one.
The industry structures are perfectly designed to capitalize on that perpetual emotional drive.
The source material is consistent in its final provocation that runs through all these phenomena, from charismatic YouTubers building fan armies to major corporations performing personalized apologies. You must always consider not just what information is being shared or even how persuasive it is, but critically, who and what institutions are encouraging and setting the economic and psychological standards for those actions.
If the entire economic landscape encourages us to see our well-being and success as solely our individual responsibility, that deeply ingrained captain of your soul ideology, how much of our online performance is genuinely free expression, and how much is forced conformity to a capitalist system that continually represses and profits off the very performers it claims to empower?
That ultimately is the real cost of influence.
A profoundly sobering thought to leave you with, and one that requires you to actively question every piece of quantified influence you encounter. Thank you for joining us on The Deep Dive.